Hello, everybody. We are live with a special stream. I'm joined by channel favourite and Adam Curtis expert, also someone who very unexpectedly used the phrase strapped with a gat recently. My good friend Stephen. How are you?
Thank you very much. Very nice to be here again. I must say this is an unusual film to do for me because it's not one I've even vaguely sort of gone near in despite having known about it for more than 40 years. I was never sort of tempted, and I think I'm reminded of the words of Harry Dean Stanton in The Last Temptation of Christ, which is sort of like an Easter film if you want to go and watch it. I know it's not very fashionable, but I quite like it, where he says to the risen Christ, I'm glad I've met you because now I can forget all about you. And so I'm glad I've watched this film and we're doing the stream because after this I can forget all about it. It's unrelentingly awful.
It is. And Simon, I did feel guilty. I did feel very guilty. I did proposing it to you.
Yeah.
If people haven't got it from the title, I mean, YouTube has all sorts. We are talking about Ruggero Deodato's Cannibal Holocaust from 1980. And now that we're over 1 minute in, I feel I can say the title of the film without maybe risking that weird little Wikipedia box appearing. Although who knows what might be triggered.
Ah, yes, of course. I forget these things. But of course, I understood, I did a little brief digging around the other night, that this film's in a lineage of, I think, 3 films he made. There was a previous one in sort of 1970 or 71 called Jungle H-Word. And then there was a third one he made. And it looks like it was the guy from The Hills Have Eyes in it or something.
Last Cannibal World,
Right.
I think, preceded this. Like The Never-Ending Story, completely misleading title. No, it was evidently not his last Cannibal World, and he in fact was trying to revive it and add to his little collection of cannibal movies. 3 was not enough, apparently.
No, you could see the first one. It's a much more conventional and, shall we say, titillating kind of piece. And I use that word advisedly, of course, because obviously a great element of this stuff is the casual disrobing of the human form in order to be glazed and leered over in the course of watching. And it's much more sort of, kind of almost, you can't really say about a cannibal film, but genteel and cute, although it still has all of the sort of, the recognizable features of the exploitation genre, with the casual topping of our scaly friends and so on.
Yes, I mean, all true, all correct. But let's just put it out here. There is a reason we are talking about this film in particular, and not Last Cannibal World or Cannibal Ferox or Eaten Alive or any of the other Italian cannibal movies. We are talking about this one for a very specific reason, because it offers an extremely timely and very conscious effort to address the theme of savagery and the politics of savagery, if you may allow me that term, the uses and abuses of the idea of the savage. Obviously, people talk about Cannibal Holocaust a heck of a lot on YouTube. The angle that tends to be taken is the censorship or how extreme it was. And that's not really the angle that we wanted to add to, but this idea of the uses, the political uses of the idea of the savage, that is interesting. And that has been hit on quite recently. But before we go a bit further, I do want to send a massive thanks to 2 very special people. Distant Night, who's kicked off the super chatting, proving that his super chats are not banned as they were, unfortunately, on Thursday. We're not getting through, sending $5 Aussie, and also just casually dabbing on Lawrence, who likes to get the first one in, but here is denied by the Aussie menace. And then this has been followed up by a $50 Aussie dollary-do super chat, extremely appreciated, saying, S tier analysis is proudly sponsored by the sovereigntist contributor Distant Night. Mind your sovereignty, but actually, Simon, you've got the sales voice. Would you mind?
Would you want me to read this whole thing?
Yeah,
S-tier analysis is proudly sponsored by sovereigntist contributor DK. Mind your sovereignty with the sovereigntist over on Substack. Articles on politics, history, and culture. Back to invaluable insights of Professor Properchew and Dr. Deeplaw Roberts. That's
masterful. Wonderful. Yes, yeah, you've got the voice for it. Thank you ever so much, Distant Night, and hello to everyone in the chat. I know this will be an unusual stream, but some of you like when we go big brain on this. And luckily, the other person who I really want to thank is actually in here. I'm getting confused by the screen names and the screen handles, but I do believe I recognize that avatar. So I want to say a special thank you. Oh gosh, where is my note? Forgive me. There we go. A special thank you to Open Wounds, who was an absolute star, and I do believe you're in the chat, who sent £70 for this stream way back in, I believe, January, and mentioned that I'd been led to a wonderful book about it by a chap called Nathan Wardinkski. Excellent book called Dissecting Cannibal Holocaust. And I was a tad intimidated by the standard academic book price tag. And then Open Wounds just dropped £70 as a super thanks on the stream and said, yeah, go get the book. So I want to express special gratitude to you for that. It's very much appreciated. And I hope you enjoy what we do with this stream. Because I can actually confirm that was a really good book. There's maybe we sort of got into it, but I'll just make this explicit because you did mention it backstage, Simon. That there is a thing that I have said I would never cover this film.
Yes.
So why are we doing this?
Exactly. I was baffled a little that we were actually. I think you remember there was two films you mentioned. This one and something else that you wouldn't cover generally speaking, was it? Or was that something else that somebody else wanted to cover on the channel and you wouldn't cover?
So among the regular co-hosts, I think we've all got one or two films that we've just said like, no, never again.
Right.
I'm just not watching it again for a casual Thursday review. For me, it's the animal cruelty, and I think people know I have a total weakness for it. I can't watch it. It gives me nightmares. It squicks me out. I cannot. I have an extreme low tolerance for cruelty to animals, and in Cannibal Holocaust, everything is infamously unsimulated. These are real deaths and real torturous deaths. I've talked a little bit in a very old video about how that was handled by the BBFC if people are interested. But it's not an angle I care to pay attention to. And I wouldn't tend to direct people to it or rewatch it just because a normal review, I just prefer to stay away from something that unpleasant, just as that crime guy wants to avoid funny games because he just found that too upsetting. And I certainly wouldn't watch Speak No Evil again. An absolutely wonderful but extremely traumatic horror from Denmark. But we're not doing a casual review of this. We are looking at a very specific angle, and I kind of got thinking about this angle of the politics of savagery when I was watching one of the Deeplaw streams that you were on, Simon. For people who aren't aware, you are 74 episodes into the complete review of everything Adam Curtis has done.
Yeah, that's right. A academic agent started going through all of his documentary oeuvre, starting with An Ocean Apart, which is actually a very good and under examined Curtis documentary, which people should go back and watch all of them from the start. But those ones are also particularly intriguing because they bring to light a lot of stuff that resonates with the content on that channel. And I've been in there since we did the Mayfair set. We're currently coming to the end of Can't Get You Out of My Head. And we'll be moving on after that to Trauma Zone, one about Russia, which is 7 hours of Russian grimness. And then the last one, Shifty, eventually. So this will probably take us well into the year. We are taking it at a leisurely pace, with interspersed with too much banter, obviously, but it's all good fun, and I try to kind of bring out stuff that isn't explicitly there or explained in the archive that Curtis uses, some context, bits and pieces of interesting annotation, and things that will help sort of add something to the experience, a bit like a DVD commentary, or an annotated text, to give you a bit more to chew on. It maybe can also ruin the documentaries as well, because it can take away the aesthetic effect of the flow of that. But I think you may be referring to the stuff. Was it the stuff on Napoleon Chagnon that we did?
It was
when we
indeed
did the Trap.
in the Trap. Yeah. Yes.
Very interesting.
That came out in 2007, I believe. And there's a section in it that draws heavily from a book written in 2000. Now, what's maybe a good way into this is to speak in broad terms. This character, Napoleon Chagnon, has something of a the word coming to my brain is parody, and it's wrong. Parallel.
Right. Well, there's a figure in it that you mean the Munro character in.
Yes, I mean extremely broadly, an extremely broad one. For one, Munro is characterized as being kind of like a desk academic, and it's rare for him to go out into the actual wild to do his anthropology, whereas Chagnon was extremely prolific in his excursions. He spent about 5 years in total among the Yanomamo, was working on them for 25 years. So he was not just a desk guy.
Yeah. I mean, the characterization in this film of this character, Professor Munro, I mean, one has to say this isn't a film you come to for the acting, I have to say. It both has bits of acting in it, as it has bits of cinematography in it, but these are kind of really broad in the sense that the film you've got to see as a satire. Or certainly, I certainly do. And the actor playing Professor Munro was a chap called Robert Kerman. And now, interestingly, Kerman himself did actually take part in various expeditions exploring primitive animalistic behavior and intimate anthropology.
Method actor, I believe. He goes really deep in his roles.
He very, very deep indeed. He left no dark cavities of the world unexplored in films like Anyone But My Husband and Blow Dry and Sex Wish, Inside Jennifer Wells, directed by Jennifer Wells, and Debbie Does Dallas and Debbie Does Dallas 2, The Satisfiers of Alpha Blue, The Devil in Miss Jones Part 2, Center Spread Girls, and Liquid Assets. Don't ask about that one.
Do I need to see The Devil in Miss Jones before the sequel, or will it not make sense?
The spoilers in it, you mean? I don't know.
Yeah,
you never know. He was a porn actor who went under the moniker of R. Baller, Richard Baller, Dick Baller. So he's not exactly going to get an Olivier Award anytime soon. So it is a very much a perfunctory performance with, I'm the academic with a pipe in my mouth, which, denotes that I'm a eccentric, cerebral character. So it's very much kind of winking at the camera acting, if anything.
Yes, it's quite an incongruous pipe. I like this shot because it shows you almost like the ascent of man. Yeah. The way that, I like to tell myself that stuff is deliberate. But to an extent, I think it is. As we have said, Deodato, it wasn't his first rodeo, and we are going to get into the territory of how Cannibal Holocaust is kind of a reaction to some of the aspects of cannibal movies and the worldview that we are most interested in. So we'll cover this. So there's lots of conscious stuff. And we should probably say, before we go much further, you'll get a sense of what happens in the film, but we'll give you the very rough play-by-play of the film. In short, We start off with a rescue narrative where this academic, Professor Monroe, is tasked with going into the jungle to find a missing bunch of documentary makers. They've disappeared among the savages, etc. And Monroe goes out there. He undertakes a fairly perilous quest to get the footage. He finds it. He's initially taken by one tribe through to an area with two warring tribes, which are far more deadly, the Shakatiri and Yanomamo. Of those, the Kumo, Yanomamo, and Shakatiri. Only the Yanomamo are an actual group. But we will get a bit further into that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
He recovers the footage after this fairly perilous journey, comes back, and then when he is within that framing story, when he starts watching the footage, he uncovers an entirely different side of things. But maybe we can leave that until a little bit later in the stream, because I think this initial framing story, an early section of it, is where we sort of have our lead into Napoleon Chagnon, which is sort of our jumping off point.
Yes, I mean, Chagnon, for people who don't know, was an anthropologist who, famously back in the was it back in the late 60s, early 70s?
Very much so, yes.
Went and embedded himself, if you like, in these communities of Yanomamo in the Amazon, and essentially what his discourse boiled down to, as was covered in the Adam Curtis documentary of The Trap, is that he was filming the Yanomamo people, and in the course of that filming, there were interactions that he had with them where he brought Western goods, such as things like axes and so on, products of industrial Western civilization, which then it's contended became the sources of contention and violence within those tribes. And the controversy about his work is that he posited a link between people's reproductive success, if you like, in the tribal context, and their ability to inflict and wield violence. And he tracked the participants in conflicts and found that there were, if you like, genetic lineages that were being expressed as having, if you like, unconscious affiliation with each other while they were engaged in these acts of violence. And the question arose from Western academics as to whether his act of observing, one of the classic sort of scientific conundra is that does his act of observing and thereby introducing Western goods into the context of a primitive pre-industrial people change and alter their behavior? And he he committed to the claim that violence was more or less inherent because it was tied up with the nature of the intensity of affiliation of those genetic relations between people, and not just the fact that he was observing. And this was, in the Curtis documentary, something that he's challenged with, and he reacts poorly to it. What you see in the literature about Chagnon is that a lot of the people who attacked him essentially were favoring a sociological view of violence, that it could be, if you like, developed, installed, accentuated by these kinds of other interactions, such as the bringing of weapons into the scenario, the bringing of some kind of commerce into the scenario, the interactions with Western people. And they questioned the sort of ethics about painting ethnic groups inherently as violent savages. And they pointed out that his depiction of the Yanomamo sort of broke with anthropology's traditional ethics of trying to describe a foreign society sympathetically. And they argued his depictions sort of resulted in increased hostility and racism against the Yanomamo by the settlers and colonists around in the Amazon. So I felt after when we actually did those episodes that Curtis did a slightly tendentious framing, let's say, and he favoured Chagnon's critics, and I think that's partly because Curtis in himself has a thesis of trying to advocate that change is possible in the world, but it is about explicit agency in us that matters. That we have to effect change by our actions, and you can't, if you like, allow these kind of, if you like, quote, natural features of societies to express themselves. You have to modulate them in some way. So we have to look at the violence of the society and we have to modulate it to be more, quote, peaceful or more like us, or more, we have to use our profound understanding of Western liberalism to change them.
I found it a puzzling stance because it's also in the trap, I believe, that he's covering the sort of fallout of the Rwandan genocide and the sort of complex. It gets more complex because in that case there's a colonialism aspect to it, and colonialism comes up a lot in Wardinkski. And there's such like why these studies are happening, why some of the documentaries we'll discuss were made, but in that one there seemed to be something of a Curtis seemed, I don't know if you'd accept the word distressed or extremely lamenting that.
Well, what had happened with
the attempt to do a story of I don't know, the beleaguered sorry, I'll get it the wrong way around. The beleaguered Tutsis taken out by the Hutus.
No, that's right. Essentially, the Belgians had come in and more or less appointed the sort of gentle aesthetic and cerebral, Tutsi to be the ruling elite, but they were a minority over the Hutu, and this kind of artificial demarcation in society, as these things do, breeds resentment and ultimately violence. And of course, then the violence eventually, in the nature of civil war, begins to go both ways as well. But it's the danger of, it's the classic, you look at the period of the 60s into the 70s, there's the kind of the Star Trek idea that we quest across the universe, interacting with all these wild, diversely interesting people, but we don't interfere in their ecology in some way that might go wrong. Of course, this being the very opposite of, let's say, the American project in the 20th century.
Yes, it's there's a I suppose a stream of a line of thought is the phrase I'm looking for, where they, you want to pin that warfare, the intertribal warfare, directly on the Belgian influence, and it seemed like there was plenty to suggest that actually no, there little encouragement was needed. Like Belgians may have tipped the balance of power into the minority interests, but would it have gone any other way, etc. There's a struggle with this. I mean, there's a quote from Chagnon in Wardinkski that I rather liked. Regarding his profession, Chagnon observed how anthropology had changed since the days of his field work, partly due to the popularity of postmodernism, and sociobiology was no longer considered acceptable for ideological reasons. It was now linked to fascism and racism, an association that was wrong and anti-scientific in Chagnon's view. As Chagnon describes it, his work upset people because it implied that warfare was apparently not caused by capitalist exploitation, nor was it a reaction to oppression by Western colonial powers. This raised the possibility that warfare was, in a sense, a natural or predictable condition.
Yes, and for me, when I'm looking at this film, I'm going to say what I think Deodato is about here, because he comes from his own time, his specific context, and the film reads to me in a very, almost clunkingly obvious kind of way, which feeds into what you say, though, that it's broadly an allegory about capitalism. and the way it co-opts and exploits its participants, not only in consumption, but in the act of being consumed. It's looking at a sort of grotesquely exaggerated scenario as a satire on the act of production. Yeah. And the techniques of, communicative framing, distancing, emotional cueing that you use in order to do that. And in particular, it differentiates its participants in these behavioral dimensions that is what the anthropologist is talking about. But it uses those to justify the way it then abandons normal moral frameworks, and in essence uses the sort of glamorization of excess, violence in this case, to foster modern rituals of very sophisticated aesthetic violence, to act as a kind of stimulus and feedback mechanism. You're sort of using the ultimate taboo, cannibalism, to show a kind of, it's a sort of desacralizing effect on the body and on the mind, as a kind of satirical provocation, in the way that, famously Jonathan Swift does in A Modest Proposal, that, the Irish could solve their famine by eating their babies. And the film is kind of using this critique of capitalism to say, look, you can essentially inure people to anything if you observe these dynamics.
Yeah, we have what's that? I think I have a screen cap from our. Oh yes, here she is. This scene. If you're getting a feel for the dialogue subtlety here, I hope that's yes.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it lands with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, doesn't it? It's not brilliant satire, but you can tell it's satire.
Yes.
It's just, I wondered about this with you. I just wondered, is this like a particularly Italian thing? It's sort of seeking a purification by excess. It's a way of trying to sort of find the moral message by absolutely kind of literally bludgeoning you into a kind of a post-traumatic state in some way.
Gosh, that's a question. Well, for a little background on this, this Italian movies got popular because they had just such a distinctive, weird style, and they sort of grew very popular when there was a grindhouse cinema circuit. They would put on things that a major studio would never produce. They needed things cheap. They needed them titillating. They needed them then and there. And they were able to be supplied by the Italian market, which got them their sensational content. And I think the ability to portray it as extreme as something you'd never see from an American studio helped people get over some of the idiosyncrasies of Italian horror, like translation quality, or the fact that, for reasons I've never truly understood, they were very happy to just cast international actors and have them read their lines in their own languages, and then just dub everyone afterwards. It remains extremely distracting. I also need to do a little more digging into Italian censorship laws, because I'm sure some of them did exist, as this film was indeed seized as being too far over the line.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, it's also very, you were sure to remember things like spaghetti westerns were produced in that way as well, where you would have, sort of a bilingual sets where, the actors would then be reliably, dubbed into this kind of, this oddly dissonant kind of, layer of the story that perhaps is what maybe gives it some of its unusual appeal. I mean, I don't find any kind of atmosphere or appeal to this kind of style of filmmaking, and I've never really got into things like giallo horror or anything like that. And there's something about the let's say the Italian method, we can call it, which has this sort of carnivalesque quality of grotesquerie that's so excessive and so extreme and so sort of trashy in a way. But on the one hand, there's this thing we've talked about here where one of the difficulties with this film is that you have to question whether Deodato is someone who has the artistic chops to actually say, well, look, I'm taking this story and using these many different ways to frame these acts of violence, and then I'm at the last, sort of, not the last moment, but at the last chance to hold back, I'm going to trip over the line and use real violence, and this is going to be a sort of artistic transgression. And I just didn't feel it was, in the end, very plausible that he was actually doing some kind of performance in that way, where he was drawing attention to the stepping over the line of artifice into something else, to give it almost like a transcendent quality. At best you might say that he's relying on the old argument of, well, now you, the audience, are complicit in this, you're approving this, you're endorsing it, and by watching it, isn't it terrible, we're all trapped in this act of exploitative production.
I think he's going for that. He most definitely is going for that. If people are in any doubt to that, one of the things at the end, after you're seeing the true, extreme footage that the missing documentary crew, I'll just call it the Yates footage after the main chat reading it. Forgive me if you're of a sensitive nature. It's very hard to get screen caps from this film that are decent. But for the most extreme stuff, you are literally put in the POV of the characters watching it screened for them. You're literally put in that place, and then after it's all shown, the first thing you see from that POV of an audience member is someone walks out, and then you've got them all looking at each other aghast, like, now what are you going to do about it? Now you've seen how hard it gets, how rough that footage is, what they really got up to. You're left considering, is the only right decision to be made? Yes, burn it.
Yeah.
Although the film does end with an explanation for how the real footage gets out. It does a kind of half feint at whether or not this is real, which is odd. Blair Witch Project would fully commit to that, whereas this sort of feints at it but doesn't really commit to the idea.
Well, there's a lot of slippage between different framings of real and reality in this film, which I want to talk about for a little bit. That you've got,
please,
from the beginning of the film, you've got these different sensibilities, these different forms of the story being visualized. So you start the film with a kind of standard issue nature documentary shot sweeping across the canopy of the Amazon jungle from an aeroplane, and you have this kind of this music, which I've called kind of porno music. Again, it's this period that we're in here, the sort of late 70s, early 80s, the so-called golden age of porno. This is a film about a kind of pornification of violence in a way, and you've got these different frames, like that kind of the nature documentary frame, and it presents itself as a kind of a lush travel log, with the promise of some sort of excitement, whether it's sex or violence, that it's kind of baked into the sort of styles of the time, the sort of somewhat romantic music, the sort of laid back kind of tempo of it, and you see more of this as we get into the film. You start the film, in Times Square. The camera sweeps across Times Square. There's a billboard of the Frank Langella.
I've got it for you.
There we go. The Frank Langella Dracula that's playing at the time, and then it moves to the left, and you see a load of people watching. And this is something you don't really see anymore, is it? You don't see people watching televisions in the window of a shop. Multiple frames within frames, and you see people reading on the television the news report about the disappearance of the documentary crew. And so you've got the various visual conventions there that we begin with. So you have, the photos of the documentary crew, and, there's always that kind of post-mortem convention, that when somebody's dead, you show their image in black and white, that thing. So you read this as coded past tense, death, in our society is grayed out. and it's hidden in civilization. I mean, in the jungle it's kind of viscid and brightly colored, but what you've got is the presentation of this team of young filmmakers, and they're very much framed as, they're kind of like certainly the guy Alan Yates and Faye Daniels. They're sort of framed as kind of young and beautiful and glamorous. The fact she's called Faye, actually, I thought was a little bit of a wink at Fay Ray in King Kong. Another kind of New
I'd like
York.
to think so. That'd be nice.
Interesting, the actress, actually, Francesca Ciardi, she's got an interesting history. After this, she kind of gave up acting, and she opened a very successful restaurant in Paris, and she had a coffee shop in Oxfordshire, of all places, which is interesting. And then the other two... I
started an interview with her. I did not get that far. I heard at the restaurant, and it was her first movie role.
Out of
it was this, school, and then she's like, sort of goes and just does theatre to try and cleanse herself.
Yes. So you see them framed, as I say, very much in this kind of way that they're kind of appealing, nimble youth. There's Jack, who is the kind of beach bum looking camera guy, and he's kind of a headshot, like a sort of Polaroid, like he's kind of a homeboy surfer bum, or someone like a sort of Hicksville slacker from Middle America. And then there's Mark, who's a kind of the other cameraman. He's a sort of intense Italian looking. He could actually be a sort of Italian filmmaker,
I have Mark.
Mark Tommaso.
Where is he? I got this. This is him.
That's him.
I found he looked so much like Stanley Kubrick when he was making his debut feature, Fear and Desire. I just had to get this image.
And you see this look throughout the film. He's got this kind of manic, intense kind of look, which is slightly sinister. And so the way they're framed is these kinds of, these kids, what happened to them? We set up the mystery. And then you get another sort of a package about them as we go further into the film, where there's a news crew following them as they're preparing to go on this expedition. And again, this sort of sequence of them being followed by the news crew, it very much has what I'm calling this porno sensibility, because the setups where the news crew interview them, the dialogue has this strangely stagey wooden quality. I mean, it's, as I say, it's especially enhanced because two of the actors are Italian and they're being dubbed, but they kind of behave differently for the camera. It's not really spontaneous and natural the way they are set up to behave. And again, this is alerting you to this sense in which you're being made aware of image creation. And then,
I mean, that is very confirmed in a later scene. The scene that gives the film its sort of famous cover image of the woman impaled all the way through her body and out the mouth, like Vlad Tepes style.
Yes.
You've shown footage of Alan, isn't it?
Yes.
Mr. Yates. I can never remember any names.
Yeah.
Yates is looking at her, delighted at this spectacle, and they say, "We're filming." And he suddenly switches into acting mode.
Exactly.
And he delivers things
mood
with that same awkward delivery that you talked about.
Yes, they go into sort of anthropology mode, where you use this kind of distancing sort of address to camera to say that now we're being very formal and analytical and so on. But the other ways that the film trips you between these kinds of forms is then you have following the engagement of Professor Munro to go off and go off on his quest and look for these kids, and it it's framed in a strangely how do I put it? It's sort of a shot that's cutting across a lawn at a university. It's actually it's a place called the Hall of Fame for Great Americans on the NYU campus in the Bronx. And he's there and he's getting his kind of marching orders from someone else, and he kind of sticks a pipe in his mouth and does a kind of cheeky wink and then saunters off across. It feels like this very staged acting. It's being set up for the camera like a news crew would set something up. They'll tell you to sort of we want you to walk here and look over here and we'll film it and make it look quote natural. And then you go, to the sequence where you go to the jungle, and again you encounter these soldiers, and that's very much filmed, if you like, in a naturalistic way, like we would see a feature film. So we are the audience point of view, watching. The cinematography is deftly set up. The color looks wonderful. The stock looks very bright and crisp, and the acting seemed, quote, naturalistic. And as we go through, there's these different, as I said, these different modes of performance that come into the film. There are scenes in a boardroom where the acting then gets being back to a kind of theatrical acting, across a boardroom table. It's sort of Titanic kind of conflict, between like Shakespearean lords almost, about I want this, I want that. No, you can't have that. And there are sort of these levels of formality and informality that are played with right throughout the film.
Yeah, and the film stock supporting that. Of course, the boardroom scenes look neat. I think that there is 35mm like the rest of the Monroe stuff, but then the veracity, the verite is that rough, tough 16mm scratches and all.
Yeah, very much. I mean, this sort of shot here, you're seeing, it's very obviously kind of emulating footage from the TV footage from the Vietnam War. The scene where they torch the village. It's obviously meant to bring back that kind of resonance.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they're going for it. Definitely. Subtitles very weird in this bit. What can I say? So I couldn't resist.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, on the bit of implicating the viewer. Sorry, just while we're in that section, I noticed before the massacre really kicks off, a very unusual and I believe lone POV section. There's Francesca there. It's Faye coming up. But first person perspective of you, the viewer. Simon, you viewed it. You did this. You, the viewer.
Yeah.
Taking the rifle before the massacre ensues. I thought that is so very deliberate. So yeah, he's definitely going for the implication of guilt on the audience there. But yeah, I like I like what you're saying about the levels of formality being played with. I think it's conscious. It's very conscious.
Yeah,
because part of what this is trying to do is, how can I say? I believe Ruggero Deodato was wanting very deliberately to address some of the problems with the films that come prior to it about their level of reality, their staginess. They are purporting to be the real thing and give you a view into a world that would not be shown elsewhere. But their veracity is the thing that's very much in doubt. So that's particularly, I mean, I see John Gorris has brought these up, so don't worry, John. You are on the money as ever. We are there. We're going to talk about the Mondo movies. Because Cannibal Holocaust, as much as it can seem like just an extremely horrible Italian horror movie, rightly banned, in my opinion. But it is layered. There is layered critique here. Deodato includes in this explicit footage, I think it's even been mentioned actually, that footage shown in the movie, in the Green Inferno sequence, so previous footage released by Yates and his crew, is real footage of executions from, I believe, Africa Adio. So yeah, real executions, and it's passed off as something by this crew that we later find out are fabricating incidents or stoking up violence themselves, faking it to get not the reality of a savage world, but just to get sensationalist footage. So that is a real critique leveled at the filmmakers of some of these Mondo documentaries.
I mean, it's layers of difference, isn't it? Because it's like it's okay. It's almost. I don't know if by that point we've seen animals killed, but when you've got another level of, it's all about distancing. essentially. You see this particularly when you go cutting between the shots of the jungle with very open, if you like, panoramas, and New York, where you've got very heightened perspective. You're looking, I mean, whether it's the beginning of the film, you're looking down, from the top of the Empire State Building, or you're on the street level looking up all the time at these massive skyscrapers. You see it in the boardroom sequences where they all sit around this table, which is kind of sort of shaped a bit like a giant canoe in a strange sort of echo of the Amazon setting. And they've got these columns around the boardroom, which are they're like pillars in a temple of stone. Yeah. And the way they place the camera lens at the head of the table, it kind of foreshortens the perspective, and it sort of emphasizes distance, but also compression of space and into the frame. And so, the built structures emphasize people around them as diminished in New York. Yeah. And the table is almost completely unsat at.
There's the angle for you just for how diminished you are.
And you've got the small elite at one end of the table. They're in the space of control. And what you notice is there's many spaces at the table that people don't get to sit at. I think this again is Deodato, with his Marxist critique of capitalism, that you don't get to participate. They get to create the images here. So it's, and the executives are having these conversations about, well, the film is showing the truth, and again, this is very much in contention at this time. You've got, I mentioned there's also a very well-known documentary from the time called the tribe that what's it called again? Was it The Tribe That Hid from People? The Tribe That Hides from Man. It was a documentary by Adrian Cowell in 1917. It won quite a lot of awards. It was set in the Brazilian Amazon, but in a way, you see lots of prefiguration of the sort of shots you see. It's more of the kind of anthropological procedural documentary. It was shot, the cinematography was shot by a man called Chris Mengis. It's quite nice to look at. It's quite a good documentary, I have to say. And it's not attempting to be sensationalist, but it is obviously giving you a sort of a stark view of these isolated tribes. And as I say, this throughout the film is attempting to sort of give you these elements of distance in the framing. So like the footage of the executions, again, that's kind of, well, it's real, but it's on film. So we're kind of removed a little bit from a sense of culpability and indulgence, because, well, it's historic stuff that's already it's already happened and it's been put on film. Well, we can't really do much about it. It's shocking. And in the film, of course, it's left ambiguous, as you say. They say, oh, well, the director set this situation up with the governments in the country. These are fake executions. And as we know, they are actually real. There was a lot of filming of executions, particularly in Nigeria in the 70s. There's a place called Bar Beach, I should say, Bar Beach in Lagos, which you had a number of executions that were filmed. Some of them feature in Adam Curtis documentaries as well. And it's kind of odd watching this stuff. The people being shot were usually there was people like bank robbers who'd been caught and were being shot, or sometimes it might be political opponents. In places there was some footage of executions from Uganda at the time as well. And there's bits of stuff in there like Vietnam, what looks like Vietnam atrocity footage. And again, it sort of trips close to the line of some of it. Well, can you tell or can't you tell? Is it staged? Is it just a rush from a film of, a roadside execution or something like that? But you're assured, that this is the custodians of reality are these TV executives, and they are giving you within the reasoning of, if you like, the capital act of production, the reasoning for reality itself. And in their justification, it's because it's sensational.
It's what people want. You're giving them what they want. Yeah. The logic is very much put on trial, and totally agree that they've the distancing technique is used to try and put that level through. But as we are told, we know it's real, so it puts it in doubt. One of the other things that stood out to me in that section was Slavoj Zizek as the editor. I thought was great.
And strangely, the editor is he's got more of a moral compass than the people upstairs in the boardroom.
Oh yeah.
Because he's saying to them, well, I've looked at the footage and it gets worse. So he's actually got some, sensibility from sitting through hours of, deadening atrocity porn. While upstairs, the boardroom people are saying, well, this is reputable journalism. And, we think about it in the modern age as well, that the implication of veracity is really just connected to corporate heft. It's the fact that we are a massive corporation. There's lots of people on payrolls and we've got departments here and there all over the world. We've got this impressive machinery of production and ownership. So we wouldn't tell you lies, would we? We wouldn't invest all that to just spin you a load of crap.
I mean, that is a very standard. I'm sure we will all recognize that, Simon. The idea that what the only source you've got from this is some little Twitter account, some Substack. Yeah. What? You expect me to believe a Substack? Look, the BBC would have reported on it.
So this is the
Why
kind of reason.
Why can't I find any party instrument talking about this thing, criticizing their worldview?
Hence the kind of shots of New York, these imposing obelisks, that almost feel like they're about to fall on you, are kind of the anchors of this truth. It's all there, if you like, in the corporate power, invested in the architecture.
I'm with you on that. I'm hoping I can sell you on another thing, and it's a much more trivial point. Something that is very obvious at the start that we should say is that there is a move to equivocate. There is we're flying over the Amazon initially, the Amazon jungle, with the wonderful score by Riz Ortolani. Even folks, if you don't want to watch this film, and you probably won't by the time we're done with you, if you don't want to watch the film, do listen to Riz Ortolani's Cannibal Holocaust theme. It is so much better than you would ever expect. I love it. I just had to praise the soundtrack. So we're flying over the Amazon jungle and we're getting voiceover about that. And then we are in the New York footage and they're still talking about the Amazon jungle while showing you footage of New York. Later, we get some less subtle stuff, like just tying it in, making sure you've always got greenery in shot. This is the end image, but, he's disappearing in a way into the jungle again. They try and mix it up a bit. Sometimes they're equivocating shots, like when we get the footage back for the first time. There wasn't a great way of doing this. I apologize, but we go panning down from a shot of a bird who's on this perch. You can see the leg there, to the reels, and it's sort of suspended up there from some kind of structure. The silver is standing out, and then we'll keep panning down and see more of the reels within this big rectangular structure in the jungle, and then we immediately go to this. It's not the smoothest one ever, but the idea of the parallel is in there. And given that the film is talking about who are the real savages.
Well, this is an interesting question. Did you pick up the visual reference in that shot of him walking out on the street that comes from earlier in the film? If you just click back to that one, that shot
this
there.
one, yes.
Did you pick up the little
the removal van with the tree on it?
Yes. It's the Atari logo that's on the back, tattooed on the back of the kid that they capture.
No, I did not catch that.
Just look at your DMs. Look at your DMs. I've just sent you the image. You'll see the son of the shaman.
It is indeed. Let me get that. That's brilliant, Simon. This is why I asked you on for this. I just caught that they'd filled it with trees, so that they're like, oh, he's going back into the jungle. But that is an even better bit of continuity. Here we are.
So this is, you've got this transfer of the, a lot of the film is about, these signifiers, and what you see is the signifier here has become commodified.
Yeah.
Now it's just a logo. It's just a corporate logo now. But maybe it says something about the connectivity between the shaman, the shaman in the jungle, and what's the curious dark magic of of commerce.
Well, the line being criticized in the film is this idea of the logic of capitalism, the endless consumption, the endless drive for further sensationalism until everything is cannibalized. That's some of their critique of the original Mondo documentaries. The idea that's brought out in Wardinkski, more tied into this idea of the politics of savagery, is an idea of sensational footage to kind of assuage assuage worries and concerns about Western power's place in the world post-colonialism. So like these documentaries are going out as the Western countries are withdrawing from their colonies, and the fear is, it's all going to come crashing down, or come tumbling down. And that's Wardinkski's take on this. I'm trying to find the exact quote because I sort of highlighted this. Oh, I've got it. I highlighted this with, I'm afraid, a bit of a chinny reckon. Right. Okay. We take a while to reference Adio, so bear with me here. There's a long section in the book about depiction of savagery in various fictions here.
Can I just
in this case,
say something while you look? Sorry, I was going to say, if you were allowed to look for something, I can speak over about something
okay.
else.
I've got the quote, but thank you. So here we go. Right, so there's two in a row. Forgive me. So talking about these Mondo documentaries, so the Italian documentaries, which are just looking like vignettes composed of raw footage, very sort of light on narrative, but composed of sort of shocking scene after shocking scene. Aside from scandal, Africa Adio is notable in the way it represents the West's anxiety about the end of colonialism. Like Manifest Destiny, the European colonial project was predicated on taming a wild world and bringing civilization to people who supposedly didn't have it. As a reaction to the end of colonialism, Africa Adio inadvertently exposed the nationalism and ethnocentrism that had informed it. The documentary depicts Africa not as a network of independent nations. Chat, steady on. Each with its own... I'm just quoting him, guys. Each with its own unique cultures and histories and challenges, but as a collective. The film was shot in various places in Africa, but Africa Adio rarely, if ever, identifies where particular events are set. It's a morass of poaching and street violence. The chaos contained in the film was a reactive warning to Western audiences that the savage hordes that had supposedly been brought to heel under colonial rule were now unleashed. This anxiety and fascination with the other were all at the heart of the Mondo genre. This is followed by a quotation about Tarzan. So again, further reading the idea that there are multiple narrative projects to get this worldview across. The colonial meaning of Tarzan is fairly obvious. The white Tarzan lives in the same jungle as these non-white natives, without the benefit of the accumulated knowledge of ancestry and community, and yet he is somehow better equipped at surviving in the wilderness than they are. He also has a unique connection to nature. Tarzan is able to communicate with primates and elephants and mobilize their help. Apologies for this pronunciation. Cesar Sola Garcia observes that Tarzan is a metaphor of colonialism itself. He represents a colonial control over the natural resources of Africa, whereas uncivilized Africans show all the signs of savagery. They are cruel to whites and among themselves, and they practice primitive rites. They defy the colonial order, and due to their brutish character and lack of modern weaponry, they are destined to be defeated by colonial forces. Tarzan is antithetical to Mr. Kurtz of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Instead of descending into madness, Tarzan blooms in the wilderness as a Nietzschean Superman who is far more competent at managing the affairs of the jungle than the people who have lived there for generations. This is essentially the same message of Jacobetti and Prosperi's Africa Adio.
It's funny, Tarzan came up in my thinking about the film as well without having looked at that reference. There was a sense in which, you know, what you see in another of the film's frames is, you know, Munro, the anthropologist, with his kind of cool, detached gaze, and what you realize from it is that he's a moral being with anxieties about, you know, human flourishing and behavior, but he's also got this, you know, we're bringing science to the examination of reality here, and the anthropological is an attempt to kind of to sort of hack the system in a way in the jungle. It allows you to come in, you can read the signifiers and you can replicate and then mimic them, and that gets you to the transactional mode. The commerce of the goods, the exchange of the power dynamics, or the exchange of microbes, or moral discourses, or social organization, you know. So it's that way again of allowing the, you know, the capital mode to infiltrate, you know, the savage world. But when the capital mode sort of comes in this sort of setting, it acknowledges a sort of a sense of the natives being at home in their space. It's almost a flip on the Tarzan thing. It's saying to the natives, you know, you Tarzan, but me Godzilla. I'm coming in to smash up your gaff, you know.
You sense that he was the character Munro was particularly proud that, in contrast to everyone else who offers them weapons, he offers them a tape recorder.
Yes, they don't respond to the gun. He fires the gun and there's no reaction, but he plays back the music of themselves, their tribal kind of aesthetics, and they come to listen, you know. So it's the signification of familiarity that's effective. The signification of violence isn't effective. So again, it's that hacking the system with the anthropology. That's what it lets you supposedly do. Yeah.
I think he was also at that point. The other aspect is just that he wants to see himself as above the jungle still. I think he's still hoping that he can see himself as, well, basically distinct from his Western guide Chaco, who is like very accustomed to just a level of brutality that he thinks is just goes with the territory. And Munro, at this point in the film, does not accept that.
Yes. He
Oh,
sees
sorry,
himself as an elite, able to read them better than Chaco. That's the interesting thing, isn't it? That he says, I must gain the confidence of the savages. After all, they too have rules of conduct. And, you know, but in a weird way, the anthropology hacks are more appreciable to Chaco and Miguel. You know, they're more able to kind of speak the language in a sense, in a sort of untutored way. You know, they're you know, Munro sees himself as the kind of elite with sort of diplomatic control, but Chaco and Miguel are kind of more down to earth, you know. And, you know, Miguel gets his kit off and, you know, signals that he's got one of their guys prisoner, so they come out to talk. You know, it seems bizarre and stark, you know, literally to us, but it's obviously it's effective. You know, he's the guy who can actually read the behavior in a sense that Munro can't. Munro's kind of trying to formalize it into his anthropological, you know, grid of understanding. And it's strange because there's a shot at the point that Munro's talking about, you know, well, I've got to go and win their confidence, and there's a cutaway shot of Miguel of is it Chaco like whittling a spear, you know, and for a moment he sort of seems like the primitive to Munro's point of view.
He truly does understand the world. I mean, Munro fails his first test when he's on the way. He sees how to describe for YouTube a death sentence preceded by violation and mutilation. It's not a pleasant scene. It's very early in the movie, and he wants to go and stop it. So, that anthropological distance.
Yeah,
it's not working, is it?
And I mean, we see it with the footage as later on. No, we see it with Yates, you know, and he talks about, well, it's because they've got this sort of high regard for you know, virginity, that they, you know, they sort of explains the violence
Yes, yes. But that violence is portrayed as very real. But as we sort of discussed, there are, in the world of Mondo and in the world of Cannibal Holocaust, this violence was, or this depiction of violence in a savage world, was controversial. You know, Wardinkski's got his own take on it, that it's effectively tied to colonial rule. You know, I read that quote out, and it's sort of like, for all he says about Tarzan, I'm afraid all the word Rhodesia just came to my mind over and over again. Hard to help that, basically. But it's very much against the prevailing progressive worldview. You know, even if that is not the intention of these Mondo documentaries, it was interpreted that way, and as such, that had to be pushed back against. We talked a little at the start about some of the academic attacks on Chagnon's work. You know, the critique of things like Affogato, of it's not properly identifying where everything's happening. I can sort of see it, but if the point is actually the chaos is widespread, and it doesn't make a huge difference, then if that is the point, then the criticism doesn't hugely land. But more on Chagnon, I think. I mean, do we need to talk a bit more about how he was targeted, you know, by various people, or do you think we can sort of take that as read?
For my part, it can be taken as read. I mean, as I say, he's essentially this crux of conflict for decades after he does his work. You know, because it's sort of, you know, a classic industrial conflict, isn't it, really? You know, there's people who've got a very great investment in the anthropological mode, and Chagnon is blowing apart, in a sense, the kind of underpinning structural thesis of the modern anthropological mode, anyway, at least in the 20th century. I don't know what, you know, the 19th century anthropological mode might have been like, but I suspect it might have been a little more direct or honest in many ways about differences between people. And Chagnon is obviously trying to sort of, you know, tear away the kind of fundamental, basis on which, you know, the culture and difference is thought about, insofar as it is, a plastic thing that, is modulated in different ways in different countries or places. But it doesn't have any kind of linkage to sort of deep buried atavistic ways. In a sense, this whole exercise of, you know, like I referred to the documentary, you know, The Tribe That Hides From Man. One of the problems, obviously, one of the key problems for this film is, you know, the executives want something sensational to show the people. But there's also a problem in that, you know, it's kind of nature red in tooth and claw. It's a realistic view of people living, you know, without Western kind of liberal norms. And you know, how conflict and, if you like, things like hierarchy exist in a very sort of stark Darwinian way. And so it's understandable in a sense that, you know, well, I guess modernity is going to want to sort of, cover this up a bit and, you know, scrape the creepy crawlies back under the carpet.
Very much so, very much so.
And also, I would just add that there's also an element, I find, as you go on in the film, that you begin to sympathize more with the natives, you know, not just because they're sort of terribly abused in the film by, you know, the interloping, Western documentary crew. But there's a lot of, in a sense, a kind of, you see hints of it in the film, you know, where Monroe goes, in particular, he gets his clothes off and he goes into the water, and all of these sort of tribal girls come in, and there's a lot of sort of, you know, laughter and playfulness, and the music kind of goes back into a sort of innocent kind of mode. And there's these sort of aspects you occasionally see the tribal people are in this kind of state of Edenic innocence, and they're more likable than the people who are sort of, I mean, yes, there are savage things happening, but at the same time, there's there's timidity and you know, vulnerability that they exhibit, that our quote heroes, with, you know, from the very start of the film, don't have any sense of, from the opening commentary of the film is the guy on the Empire State Building saying man is unlimited, and sort of glorifying the achievements of modern techno capital society. And then you've got Yeats in the jungle saying violence, this is what happens every day in the jungle. It's a
in the
struggle.
jungle, it's the daily violence of the strong overcoming the weak.
Yeah. So there's this kind of extremely emphatic kind of Nietzschean sort of cod Nietzschean kind of self-justification going on against the film, which then you begin to so in a sense what I'm saying is you see that the tribal people in a sense have more metaphysical connection than the people coming in from the outside. They have some remnant of some sense of the sacred.
Yes.
That these guys
absolutely
don't.
They're invested in it. It's very clear, like the fact the ritual is such a big thing for them. You can see like they have not been corrupted by that, whereas this horrible cynicism it's just horrible for them to be productized,
Yeah, and you have it in the image you showed of like the film cans hanging from the tree. There's the element for them, it's like, well, it's considered by Monroe, are they treating these as sacred objects? But at the same time, they don't open them. So they don't have this voyeuristic kind of drive that we do to kind of to desacralize, to look inside, to sort of to kind of probe and sort of in a sense destroy what's inside. I mean, I hate to draw, it's an awful parallel, but such as the scene with the turtle, the infamous turtle scene.
Yes.
You've got the fully functioning creature that is then literally eviscerated and deconstructed in front of you. And again, another container that is gutted and emptied and made all too kind of disgustingly real, but then losing the kind of the essence of life that continually throughout the film you're seeing stomped on just simply for the sake of stim.
I think there's a line about a joke is like a frog. If you take it apart and you can understand how it works, but it won't work anymore.
Yes.
I feel like that applies to a lot of what's happening here. Like stick your nose in, try and dissect the culture, and break it apart as you try and understand what's going on. But here there's not even an attempt at understanding. It's brutal, but some of these, so I think some of the attacks on Shanyon et al. For this kind of approach, and for what he's seeing, and it should be stated that a lot of the criticisms, and Wardinkski documents this very well, I'll summarize them as just lots of people say, okay, basically Shanyon is totally right in what he's saying. It is a very violent society. It's a very rapey society. Domestic violence is all over the place. But he puts too much emphasis on it. It's very sort of celebration parallax. It's just, we're not saying it doesn't happen. It's just, why are you pointing it out? It's weird that you're looking at it. They don't like that attention drawn. A chap called Tierney appeared particularly dishonest with it, basically saying that Shanyon spread a disease outbreak. This was proven to be false, but got a lot of attention. And unfortunately, it's Tierney's book that appears to have most influenced Adam Curtis. There was another chap called Kopenauer who put himself forward as a representative of the Yanomama to try and be their voice. And I'm afraid the vibe I got for him was kind of like, on a cursory study based purely on one book, so take this with all the caveats, I just got the vibe of, kind of like a standard BLM character, putting themselves forward as, hey, I'm the representative. I'll speak for all the people. That's how this works, right? I'll step forward and represent everyone, and that's one of the things he was actually criticized for, is like, you can't really speak for the Yanomama because they don't really exist like that. They are collections of villages. There's not really a Yanomama society that you can speak about in anything other than the broadest terms of don't take our land.
Yeah, there was a few people who criticised. There was a guy called Richard Ferguson, who was the main sort of guy who sort of critiqued him from a. Ferguson mainly attacked evolutionary psychology from a sociological point of view, that materialist explanations are what matter, because this all plays to progressive assumptions about behavior. And there was another anthropologist called Marshall Salins, who was actually one of Chagnon's teachers, who identified this idea of participant instigation, that bringing the weaponry into the situation encouraged the economic competition and violence. And Chagnon obviously was forced out of the National Academy. Sorry, I should say Salins himself actually resigned from the National Academy, but Chagnon was forced out as persona non grata, and he reflected later that he just thought the criticisms of his work were all based on kind of postmodern and sort of anti-scientific ideology that sort of came up within anthropology, where they just outright would deny the aspects of things like violence and warfare and infanticide. Chagnon's thesis was really that a lot of his work undermined the idea of a noble savage, which obviously is a thing that very much tempts the kind of the Western penchant for romanticizing the native.
Oh, I'm very glad you said that. That's perfect. Sorry, perfect segue material. You're right. Because the reaction to Chagnon, I feel, goes far, far in the other way. It's okay, you can't demonize tribal cultures as we would term the savage. I'm using that with big quotation marks around it, folks, and have throughout the stream. Always picture those quotation marks yourself. But the reaction that is to sacralize, to make the noble savage, to make the perfect savage, to make the savage the embodiment of what you are hoping to push. So things like harmony with nature, greenness, ecology. Pocahontas is a great example of this. Dances with Wolves are another one. Avatar, a really obvious example. The use of the native as just an instrument for current Western environmental preferences. But in Wardinkski, I found an example that I thought was so delicious. I have to read it out. Wardinkski goes on a little diversion about the Lion King. Now, if I haven't said already, Nathan Wardinkski's book is genuinely good. It is genuinely worth it if you're interested in this stuff. And to his great credit, for someone writing in current academia, he is extremely balanced. I have my own question marks about some things. I've highlighted quite a few with a little snark, but overall, he is so much more balanced than I ever expected, and I give him great credit to that. So I just want to make sure I said that. So, The Lion King. This idea of the circle of life defines The Lion King, as well as the Disney notion of nature. Mufasa makes reference to the predatory relationship between the lions and their prey, but we never actually see the lions kill and eat anything, except for the non-anthropomorphized grubs and insects that Simba, Timon, and Pumbaa consume in the jungle. By contrast, Scar and the hyenas do attempt to kill and eat Simba and other anthropomorphized characters and are villainized for it. But the bad predators are fundamentally no different from the good predators, except that the villain's appetite knows no bounds. Of The Lion King, David Whitley writes, "The film does not really engage in any serious way with the processes that underlie profound ecological imbalances. No reason is evoked as to why predation by hyenas should be any more destabilizing within the environment of the African savanna than predation by lions, while the link to climate change suggested by the ensuing drought is a metaphor for moral degradation rather than being connected to any rational cause in the natural world. The circle of life that The Lion King refers to is not far departed from Leopold's idea of the land ethic. The film implies an ethical obligation is owed to the biota, and an ethical structure is embedded within nature itself. The Disney version of nature, and by this take this as basically the attempt to make a hagiography of the savage, to put the savage on a pedestal. The Disney version of nature is one in which the circle of life is divorced from the violence that sustains it. That mirrors the way many consumers in the industrialized world encounter their food. The average omnivore finds their meat at the grocery store filleted and packaged with no trace of the violence involved. This is especially true of meat produced under the horrific conditions of factory farming. A film such as The Lion King keeps up the illusion that meat just sort of happens and disguises the violence inherent to nature and to carnivorous consumption. So Wardinkski is doing this after several pages talking about the response to Chagnon to go way too far and deny reality.
Yeah.
And I thought he did that extremely well.
Yes. You've got both the sense of hiding the truth about people that has, this is their hidden tribe. This is why we're going off to film them. We're going to find reality. Oops, reality is a bit too close to the bone. Not only are we participating in it and creating violence, as you sort of see in these sort of emblematic, what I'm calling the Vietnam scenes, but you're also shifting the reasons for the concealment in a sense, because you're talking there about the nature of an organic ecosystem, I suppose you'd say, and its relation to necessity and in survival, whereas this is a part of a sense in this certainly the 70s, where you've got this feeling of violence welling up from within society itself. Obviously, I've referenced before films like Network, which talks about this sort of degradation that's happening in America. Things are descending into anarchy and crime, and there's this anxiety sort of runs throughout the decade, and there's something about the way that they were aware of a transformation in the society that's partly driven by technology. I mean, I referenced before. I thought I talked to you about, Videodrome, so where it talks about, television is reality, and reality is less than television. The television set is the retina of the mind's eye. This idea of the feedback loop of imagistic violence feeding real violence, and the sort of media affects theory that comes out of that, but also again the deeper the contextualization of capital as consumption and feedback. But there's also this sort of supernatural motive, if I could put it that way, or supranatural motive, is that there is a sort of a deep anomie developing in the West. And I think of something like Ballard. And I don't know if you know a book Super Can that he did.
No, I haven't read that one.
It's an interesting, lesser known one, but it's interesting. It's it focuses on a crime, a violent crime that takes place in a sort of ideal gated community in near Cannes called Eden Olympia. I mean, it's literally signifying the sort of perfected mode of sterile corporate living, and it basically is this tech park, where this sort of the technological elite are kind of living in this completely curated and seamlessly perfect world. And what they find, what you discover as you go through the book is the main character is investigating the reasons for what seems like a random, vicious act of violence, a murder or murders that take place before the story of the book starts. And he realizes what's happening is the sort of the disaffected bourgeois elites living in this tech park sort of gated community by night are making these sallies down into the ordinary parts of the town, lower down the hill, into a metaphorical jungle they go on what they call ratissage. They go on these nighttime attacks on immigrants down in the town, these kind of lower descended forms. And this is seen as a way of them managing their kind of, their own libidinal excess, which is all given way to these formalized modes of living, these disconnected, sterile, metaphysically arid ways of futuristic living. And in order to have a kind of therapy, the psychiatrist, on site basically encourages them by night to go down into the lower town and attack the immigrants.
And of course, in High Rise, he had a similar idea that your perfect environment where every need and mod-con is settled for would leave you empty and craving. And so that people just end up breaking down and needing to create the warfare and conflict again.
Yes.
Yeah. I love a Ballard reference. What's the one where the chap basically falls off the highway and then can't get back on, and he basically has to live by the side of the road? The name is escaping me. No, I'm partial to that riff, and this film maybe a bit fond of that as well. You're in the world of Deodato. Maybe it is that you've got these perfect lives or lives of luxury, and therefore you're craving that violent stimulation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a question of how you package it. When it comes to the media people at the end, you almost feel that they would put it out if Professor Munro wasn't arguing with them. And they try to justify it in various ways. This is the most sensational material ever. Why wouldn't you put this out? And Professor Munro makes a kind of simple appeal that, this is where it's immoral, it's sick, and all of the things that are obvious to us. But the film people say, but that was just a rough cut. So it's always just a question of artistic finessing, as if the aesthetic achievement in the end will outweigh the processes of production. America can have the white picket fence and motherhood and apple pie, but how much suffering it's built on, well, that doesn't matter. I mean, we're sort of throwing that into sharp relief with events right now, of course. The ability to inflict suffering and to then, reinstate yourself as a kind of bastion of moral value. And, we're seeing the difficulties of that, that, as you say, the savage is a political construct. I mean, I'm sounding very Marxist tonight, I know, but the savage essentially is the unconstrained person who lives outside the hegemon. Yes.
And the distance is essential for whatever use you have for the savage. The distance is key, because that enables you to do the projection.
Yes.
Without too much speaking back. So it's super, super convenient.
Yes.
I mean, I can't resist but thinking of, I can't remember his real name. Ionized Cody? The Italian American who portrayed a Native American in numerous films and infamously in an ecological campaign, Keep America Clean or something.
Oh, is this the Crying Indian?
That's it, the Crying Indian guy. Yeah, he's just Italian.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah. But he's standing in there to basically be used to project an agenda on.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, and it's interesting. While all of that happens, you've got there are sort of things within the film that remain hidden as well, because you've got this section where Munro, I think, comes back to New York, and he's trying to seek out the relatives of the team who have been killed, and again he discovers that all of these very disobliging stories about them. He's talking to a guy in a cab and who knows Yates, and he says, Alan was a ruthless son of a bitch, and he tracks down Mark Tommaso's father, and he says, I just don't want to know what happened to him, he's dead now, and he finds Jack's wife, who basically says, yeah, he was good in bed, but he had no brains. You know, can I get some money out of this?
Mm.
You know, you know, and so you know, instantly the you know, the participants are also repudiated by the people in, you know, in the system as well.
Mm. Yeah, I found that section quite puzzling, to be honest. I wasn't sure what to make of it when he's. I
just
just
think
in terms of what Munro was after.
well, I think it's the idea of, yeah, Munro is perhaps trying to come to, you know, some sort of terms with, you know, the trauma of the discovery and trying to make some sort of human connection, but he finds the people are kind of are just as unsympathetic in a way to the lost documentary team. And it's just, again, it's about another layer of truth has been destabilized. You know, you had the team set up as these kind of glamorous, young, exciting, go-getting figures in the beginning, and then gradually we're peeling away, you know, the various character armors that they build up during the film. And you know, we see them, you know, somebody says in the film, well, you know, they're kind of, you know, they're really professional, but they also act like prima donnas, you know. And you sense this is the kind of formula for success, is to have this kind of split existence that these characters have. I mean, they're not very, you know, they're set up to be sort of, you know, glamorous and aspirational at the beginning of the film. Like I say, there's a kind of porno element. You know, they're very simplified caricatures of, you know, young go-getting creatives. But then when you see the footage of them on their own in the jungle, you know, the bit where they're all kind of about to set off, and you know, she walks in a towel, and you know, and they're all half naked, and what you notice is they're instantly irritable and fractious with each other. And you know, you know, they're not the kind of dream team that you're sort of being led to believe that the people who produce media are.
Yeah, and there is no loyalty there. Just the presentation of them as a, you know, team, and you know, their lucky guide Miguel as like, no, they're all sacrificial. They will all do each other in. They're all betraying each other constantly. And I mean, there's a whole other stream in the use of like the sexual use of the camera lens, but we're focused on the savage aspect. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, Monroe's sort of. What I like about this, I mean, this sort of brings it full circle, is after the Chagnon interpretation of the realities of the savage, which are very rejected, and you get the you know, excessive reaction to lionize, to canonize, beatify the savage, and you know, still use them for your political aims. Munro just goes through the film getting completely blackpilled, not just about, you know, we've been talking about him getting blackpilled in New York City. You know, he's finding out his idea of the truth really doesn't work in the network. They don't care about that. The relatives don't care, as you point out. It really rhymes and supports a lot of what Wardinkski's bringing up about the revelation of Western civilization. I'm holding back because I realize it sounds very Guardian as I say it, but Western civilization is very genuinely invested in hiding a lot of the ugly stuff. You know, I think the example of, you know, I'm an ex-vegan, so you know, I can be called a stereotype for this, but the point about obscuring the origin of meat speaks, I think, is a very strong point. It's I think even many a person here is going to love a steak, love a chicken, love a lamb stew, but will not be wedded to the horrific industrial processes that are used to produce it at a scale that is convenient and cheap for capital. You know, the village butcher working with a farmer is a far cry away from what is used to get Tesco the volume of meat that they need. But there is a lot of artifice into covering that up. And to go for an example that I'll be less bullied for by people, the idea of sort of police and political power. Like, we have the impression of, oh, you know, policing by consent, and we have free speech in this country. But the truncheon is there, and it doesn't take long to see the truncheon in the UK. If you're doing something the system genuinely doesn't want, the truncheon comes out pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we're invested in disguising.
Yeah, because and to an extent the film is showing the way that this all works is because people participating in it, they internalize these strange value sets that the kids at the beginning, the documentary team, the way they are presented, as I say, in this kind of slightly wooden, artificial, as I say, porno caricature kind of way. I mean, the way they talk in the opening section where they're filmed by the news crew, the sort of, they almost like talk in slogans, like corporate slogans. I think Faye has this line, where they're all kind of about to strike out on the expedition, and she said, "For us, the difficult doesn't exist, and the impossible just takes a little more time."
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought that rang a memory with me. I think that's a parody of an actual ad slogan. I think it was IBM. They had a slogan, "Good things take time, perfection takes a little longer." So these are kids who are products of the age of products. They've got their sort of, their shallow bandanas and designer adventure gear, and they read the world through these, kind of corporate eyes of, TV packages and this sort of chin stroking boardroom sensibility of detached control that you get. And again, it even imprints on Monroe to a certain extent. I mean, I remember noticing for some reason at one point in one action sequence early on, he's there in the jungle and he's wearing a kind of an LS jumpsuit.
Yeah, he wears a couple of less things. I found them quite hilarious.
Yeah,
they're really, really incongruous.
Yeah, and but it is funny, isn't it? You sort of you see things like that, and it's all about you can surf the wild frontier, but you can look good while doing it.
Was eating authentic foreign cuisine. Getting really stuck in. Sorry, I thought I should probably use that screen cap while I've got it. I sadly don't have more of his amazing.
I think I'll say it was raw pig meat that was being used for lots of the flesh. The documentary, there's a documentary about the making of the film, which is out there. Scottish guy. It's not one of these ones with interviews with lots of the actors. He basically went on a quest looking for locations and things, and it's quite funny because you sort of you come across some of the people who played the tribes people, the actors in those scenes, and I can't remember who else was saying it, but it might have been the Francesca Ciardi interview I saw, and she was saying, all of the tribal people, they looked really amazing, but they were just like local people who worked in offices and stuff.
Incredible.
And we ate, they use bits of raw pig for all the gore stuff.
Incredible. It's one up from George Romero making bankers be zombies.
Yeah.
I did I did highlight that one thing that we talked about backstage. Just I thought I'd show it for people. Just in terms of the lack of authenticity, the whole the Shamatiri paint themselves black, and the Yamomo paint themselves with white clay.
Yeah,
and it's like for no other reason than you can. So in this scene, you can clearly tell who's who.
Who's
and
the
battle
bad guy?
scenes make.
Yeah,
I mean, I do think this guy here looks like a Reaver from Firefly, or sorry, Serenity. If anyone's going to pick holes in it, yeah.
But it again, it is the overlay of it is a sort of overlay of the wild frontier frame. I mean, even the last sequence in the
Mark
film,
from Counts is Kevin from marketing. There's the intern. What if this is literally just like she's the intern?
Yeah.
It's a coffee lady.
There's a good big train sketch in here, I think, or something. Probably. No
way did you. I was literally going to introduce you as a man with an excessive knowledge of Big Train, and I went on something else. Oh, you're the only other person I know who'd reference that.
But you've given us, like you say, the signifiers of of these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, and these are the ones in the middle. And the last sequence in the film, where there's the sort of racing around, Alan's got the gun out and they're shooting the natives. Did you notice it felt very much like a cowboys versus Indians film trope? The dialogue's literally like, they're all around us, what are we going to do?
It's a big trope of this subgenre, is because, I mean, I'm not the first to point out that they are basically zombies. They behave very indistinguishably from zombies. It's just a different flavor of that subgenre, with very little connection to reality. But yeah, we just prefer to do our zombie movies this way. I also thought, relevant to what you were saying, was compounding the documentary crew, the Yates crew, and their falsities is just the thing that really motivates him is fame. That's a thing he kept going back to, is I want to be famous. And I think the only thing that problematizes that is the scene where after the massacre he just immediately starts mounting Faye.
Yeah.
And is very into it. So you could read that that's a sexual gratification motivation, but he mostly just keeps talking about the desire to be famous.
Yeah. And I mean, there's interesting dynamics around that you get the sense that, setting fire to the village, really has really turned them on, and yet when it then spirals off into this kind of, cascade of atrocities, they find the girl, who they rape, and then they're filming at the same time, and Faye comes out saying, what are you doing? You're filming this stuff like it's a porno. And you think, oh, maybe she's had a sort of a sudden access of moral kind of insight, but actually the reason she's angry is because it's wasting film.
Yeah.
And do you get the feeling the impaled girl is the one that they've raped, and they've actually impaled her, so they've actually manufactured the scene of the atrocity to come across like they do with burning the people in the huts as well?
I wondered, because there are many incidences. I think this isn't the stuff that I find like particularly deep. It's the know you kind of criticism, but Deodato is absolutely engaging in it. There's, if we haven't mentioned it already, the crew member who hacks apart the giant turtle is the one who is later hacked apart himself. The scenes very clearly mirror each other. The crew go and rape the Yamomo woman that they see loose, and then Faye is raped in return in some, I don't know if I can, I've got one very distorted image. I don't know if I'll get away with this, but the sort of film is shown to break down at this point. Like, you get loads of errors. I wouldn't be surprised if it were shown that their violation of this Yamomo girl results in her punishment, and then is a big inspiration for them to be attacked.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised at all, because that seems to be what it would also kind of mirror what Monroe encounters at the start, because he sees a similar punishment, and you have to wonder what kicked that off. So that sort of mirroring is something the film really likes to do.
There's something interesting, as you say, about the, you get these clips of film, and then it goes to like the scratch leader film in between the reels, and it's this sort of reiteration of imagistic horror that's kind of punctuated only by the failure of the technological capacity to get it all in. And it's like the way that in those scenes, you've got, it's the sort of interrupted view of the voyeur. There's an essential, again, like going back to my metaphor of pornography, it always kind of essentially denies fulfillment of the ecstatic, and it just lingers on the external action. You sort of don't ever get the payoff, because it's always a bit of a con, basically.
Yeah. And I think in this film actually also denies us like the clear death of the guy that we most want to see suffer as well. And as you say, you are just reminded, it's just a film. Like, you come out of it and you're like, oh yeah, that was projected. and you're really sort of slapped back, and it's kind of like the moment in Twin Peaks: The Return, where you're given your triumphant ending, and then you're presented with Kyle MacLachlan's sort of stone face superimposed over everything, like the reflection of the viewer, like, yeah, this is what you wanted, right? You want to look gormlessly at this tribe, don't you? Just my interpretation of that scene. It's a similar thing, like, yeah, this is you. Look what you were watching.
Yeah.
Are you satisfied? Was that enough for you?
Yeah, and it leaves and lingers on a sense of the confusion there, because I mean earlier on they're talking about, you know, how you deal with these pre-industrial people, and he has a line, I think he says, well, how could you explain what a movie is? They just felt that the cans were a threat, the cans of film, you know. And another interesting thing I noticed was the channel that they work for is called Pantheon, you know, as in literally the hall of the gods.
I caught that. I was like, oh, that's nice. That's nice and cheeky. There are cheeky details in this. But I just noticed our time. We're gonna have to be on this. Gosh. So I think what we've got to, so to round it, to bring it back on, Monroe has been very disillusioned by the New York side. That's easily done. But I think the stuff that gets left out of quite a lot of analysis of Cannibal Holocaust is just how much he's black-pilled about the natives themselves. Like, he does go in with a very progressive view. But in the end, it must be noted that without Yates's prompting, he's already seeing, when he arrives, scenes of very brutal violence, mutilation, violation, and killing. And I'm going to have a hard time showing this. He later sees, again, without Alan Yates and his group, I hope that's Alan Yates. I keep going for that name. Yates, let's say. Without Yates doing anything, they come across forced abortion is the wrong word here, but basically a newborn is taken and killed, presumably for being in some way sick, or for whatever reason. A group of women basically take a newborn, and this is as much as I'm going to show you, folks, and bury it. Yeah, very grim, very grim. This is stuff that happens without the Yates crew. So what Monroe is seeing as he's doing this expedition, you know, breaking his habit of being a desk academic, is he basically comes back to the Chagnon position. And he's like, actually, oh gosh, yeah, there is some real horror out there. You know, he didn't have to fake this. He just saw it. He encountered the real, and that leaves him kind of lost, which is why, in the end, he just sort of ends up washing his hands and walking away from kind of everything. Is what you get the sense of. He's sort of thoroughly black-pilled at the end.
Yeah, and you get the feeling with these New York sort of scenes that it's far easier for us to sort of disappear, you know, into the technostructure than it is for these, you know, these people out in the jungle. And you know, we talk about distancing as well. You know, one of the things you notice about the film is the very abrupt cuts between jungle and New York. And you know, when you consider it's something like a 13-14 hour flight from New York to the bits of the Colombian Amazon where the film is being shot. It's that sense of proximity that, you know, he artificially creates with the film to keep emphasizing that point. You know, at the same time, I mean, it's probably worth saying Deodato is working in the sort of shade of the Years of Lead in Italy, you know, the kind of breakdown of the body politic there, as especially, you know, the PCI, the Italian Communist Party, is kind of losing ground towards, what you call Euro-communism, and then from there you end up more or less in the sort of social democratic politics of, the sort of Tony Blair third way, that sort of begins to sweep Europe, in the 80s and 90s. And all the while you have the sense of the society itself being, there's a great cut when they've done, the height of the atrocities. It cuts back to Monroe and the TV woman in the park talking, as if they've just watched the footage, and she says, I feel drained, as if like, post-coitally, this whole thing has just taken it out of her, but that again is I think it's a very conscious attempt by Deodato to sort of link it to that sort of Marxist reading, that, Marx goes on about, capital is got a kind of vampire-like, and, it extracts living labor, and, it sort of sucks out the vitality of society. It's like a vampire. We see literally, Dracula in one of the first shots of the film.
Say, yeah.
It's the undead that feeds off, and Marx has other metaphors about, capital devouring or eating the worker, so I mean, it seems like Deodato was kind of tied to that sort of critique himself, and he latched on to the idea of seeing the violent outcomes of the terrorism of people like the Red Brigades and the horror of that on television, and feeling he had to kind of protest against, making money out of other people's misery, as Monroe puts it in the film.
I did know basically nothing about the Italian background, so that is very helpful. The shot of the Dracula, I kind of interpret it as a parallel, like Yates and crew are the sort of evil demonic force at loose in the Amazon, but here we've sort of got our own demonic forces preying over us. We sort of invite them and create them ourselves. Like you almost have to wonder what kind of sick society is interested. What kind of sicko is into these films, Simon?
Well, yeah. I mean, I do feel that. I mean, this is kind of one of those things. As I said, I'm not going to go back to this film really ever, because it repelled me. I mean, as I say, I'm reasonably desensitized to seeing, gore and violence. I mean, who isn't after being on the internet for a time? You can look at these things. You can see real, the results of real violence, the results of real, dismemberment and all sorts. And you do look at that, and then you sort of are desensitized. But what you end up here is that the filmmaker himself is trying to get us to collude in that sense. And I suppose it's because it's a dated argument now. For him, it's something much more immediate. I understand from his background, actually, he was brought up on a farm. He was used to seeing animals getting slaughtered. So it kind of didn't bother him. He was in a sense desensitized. And it was only when his son kind of, said to him, Dad, can we turn the TV off? There's all these pictures of, the Red Brigades and, people dead on the street, after some terrorist atrocity in the, in the 70s. And he started to then think about it in this way. And he became sort of very anti-media. But apparently, I mean, in later years, he just became kind of totally misanthropic. And he said, I don't trust politicians, I don't trust journalists, and I don't trust the public.
He's won me over, though. He's won me over again. I mean, the cameo in Hostel 2 helped, but I like this too.
Yeah, he's quite sort of nihilistic in the end, really. I mean, he became sort of culturally a bit more conservative. And I think we talked before the stream, I don't think he disavowed the film, but I think he was sort of, I think, disillusioned with the, as I say, the thing that repels me is the sense of hollowness of this, and the sort of the casual instrumentalization of real violence for an artistic purpose, where I think it trips over a line. I mean, I can understand, some performance artists or, some installation or conceptual artists try to use the real to kind of break through, the stultifying carapace of ideology that we're all encrusted in, to make a point. And I don't really feel like Deodato has a kind of intellectual sort of foundation for this, other than as you say, the context of the exploitation movie market of the time, the abuse of sensation.
Yeah, the working conditions mean, like, if you've got to splash blood and gore around, like, that's using real animals is a way of doing it very cheaply, if that's what's expected. Alas, but I also do not buy the excuses.
Yeah.
I will say there is an interesting postscript to all of this, in that for all our discussion on the political uses of savagery, we cycle around again because the ideal version is still kind of in vogue. There is we don't have time to go into it a lot, but you guys can see quite a lot of literature about contrasting weird societies. So Western, educated, industrial. What's the R, Simon? D is democratic.
What's that? Sorry, I missed.
In weird, Western, educated, individualist.
I don't know the
something,
acronym.
and
Okay.
I can't remember it. Okay, a
Right.
few people have written about it to sort of analyze Western societies, and quite often there's an interesting contrast. And how do they contrast us? They love the tribals. Now, and I have been reading at the same time I was preparing this stream a book called Hunt, Gather, Parent, a very good book, an occasionally infuriating book, in which the author, an NPR journalist, attempts to answer how can we fix some of the problems we have with Western children, and what can we learn from tribal cultures. She goes to the Maya, she goes to the Inuit, she goes to the Hadzabe in Tanzania, and accounts like what we can learn from them. And it is a very good book, but I just thought, even though I can quibble with it, the main thing I thought was, we're back to we're Pocahontasing again, We're back to the idealized form. Because one of my things with all these books are, and I say all of them, about 3 of them that I'm aware of, you could draw similar parenting lessons by simply looking back in your own history, but that has got a certain conservative trad stank on it, and for that reason it's much easier to look abroad and look to the tribal to get your lessons there. So I get maybe the use of the savage is never going to go away. It's going to keep cycling. But one of the other things that makes it a little difficult, as we noted earlier, is how to say this. The use of the political use of the savage, and whatever you want to project onto them as a construct, certainly not as an actual people, but as a useful political construct, it does depend on the distance. And post about 2003, we don't have as much distance anymore, which makes some of those myths a little harder to sustain. As anyone seeing sort of footage from Clapham may come to mind to instantly date this stream.
Indeed.
But that was, I think, reaching the end of all the points that I hoped we would cover, Simon. So I think did that in very good time.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, there's again, I think there's it qualifies as being worthy of us going over as a film. I think there's more stuff I could sort of add into it, but as I say, it's there's something just at the fundamental level of it's exploitation, and I felt exploited by it in that way that I wouldn't return to it in the way that the previous films we've done, Blood on Satan's Claw, Field in England, the M.R. James stories, they don't have any resonances for me, and I think it's because of this dated kind of sort of activist almost critique. It's a sort of cri de coeur for Deodato at the time, and it uses this kind of shock tactic, and that to me diminishes in plausibility because he's got form, in doing these kinds of films, and that it becomes part of this, again, this engagement of the sadistic and the psychopathic that lots of us have talked about in recent months, with the kind of reactions to geopolitical events, that it brings out this division, this schism between people who have a kind of moral accounting of what's going on, and people who frankly are just a bunch of sick fucks. Really. That's kind of my sort of capsule review of that. And so I don't feel it really merits too much consideration now. Yes, you could explore it in all kinds of ways, and I think we've reached into the steaming viscera of it and pulled out the relevant bits, but it's not one I can return to really for any kind of good reason at this point.
Simon, for all that we poured about in the viscera, I'm not sure we ever found a heart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good.
Yes, we'll continue on this channel to basically ignore the gorehound cry for the most extreme. And continue to be basically uninterested in seeing how far horror can go, because as we know, Cannibal Holocaust, very banned, and has been long since surpassed in just how brutally nasty you can be on screen. So we continue to have little interest in that basically pornographic search for the latest boundaries of extremity. Except when we cover a Serbian film, for which I also have an interesting political reading, and therefore will make an exception. But folks, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you liked the angle we took on Cannibal Holocaust, and if you watched it, I apologize. Yes. Thank you ever so much, Simon. As ever, really appreciate the deep reading, deep thought that you bring to this, and especially for this, as I know this is, as I warned you, it's a very unpleasant film. I'm really glad you stuck through it for this.
Yeah,
really enjoyed your thoughts on
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad I'm never going to have to watch it again.
Have a nice mental cleanse. Watch Shall We Dance, the Japanese original. That'll work wonders. And chat, but pop on something cozy. Go with The Apartment from 1960 or Harvey, something like that. It'll do you a world of good. Or maybe Adam Curtis's Can't Get You Out of My Head. And then you can enjoy Simon's commentary on Wednesdays.
Please do. Come and join us. Go through the back catalogue.
Yeah. All right. Thank you ever so much, Simon. And thank you, chat. Some very generous super chats tonight. And again, thank you so much for Open Graves for sending an extremely generous donation, enabling me to get the Wardinkski book that was the bulk of my research for this. If you want to see what we're doing next, I'll quickly mention that on Thursday, we are continuing our body horror theme. We are heading over to Japan and looking at the very artistic Tetsuo the Iron Man. It's going to be a first watch for me, but I think it should be interesting territory. And I will leave it there. Thanks, y'all. Cheers.